Lucille Ball died in 1989 with almost no one by her side. The star, who used to have 44 million viewers every Monday night, spent her last years in crushing loneliness. Her mansions were empty except for hired help, her children and famous Hollywood friends stopped visiting, and even her children stopped talking to her. What turned America's most beloved comedian into a forgotten recluse? The answer involves money, betrayal, and a family secret that destroyed everything she built. Lucille Ball's life began with heartbreak when she was 3 years old. In February 1915, her father died of typhoid fever. He was only 27 years old, and her mother was pregnant with Lucille's younger brother. Because her father worked for the phone company, the family had been moving around a lot. They had lived in New York, New Jersey, Montana, and finally Michigan, where the illness struck. After her father died, everything fell apart. Her mother got depressed and couldn't take care of the kids, so Lucille was sent to live with her aunt, and her baby brother went to stay with their grandparents. Lucille would later say that her childhood was shaped by loss and bad luck. She will never forget the moment when a picture fell off the wall right after her mother told her that her father had died. She then saw small gray sparrows pecking at the kitchen window. It was a strange detail, but it stuck with her forever. From that day on, she was afraid of birds, not real ones, but pictures, drawings, and anything that reminded her of them, even when she was an adult and famous. She wouldn't stay in hotel rooms with bird wallpaper or paintings because she was afraid. Just as things were getting better, tragedy struck again when Lucille was about 12 years old. There was an accident in the backyard where her stepfather had set up a safe place for target practice with a .22 caliber rifle. He was careful to follow the rules and only let the kids shoot toward an empty field, but an 8-year-old neighbor boy who wasn't supposed to be there showed up as another child took a shot. The boy stood up and was hit by the bullet. The bullet hit the boy in the back and paralyzed him for life. The boy's family sued and won. Lucille's family lost everything, their home, their furniture, and even their insurance. Her grandfather was so ashamed that he never worked again, and they had to leave town. Lucille later said that one accident destroyed their family life. Then there was another storm. Lucille Ball was only 14 when she fell in love with Johnny DeVita, a 21-year-old troublemaker in town. Her mother didn't like it at all, so she did something brave and broke up with him. She saved up what little money she had and sent Lucille to a prestigious drama school in New York City, hoping to keep her daughter from going down the wrong path. Things didn't go as planned. Lucille ended up in the same class as B. Davis, but their futures couldn't have been more different. Davis did well, while Lucille struggled. The teachers weren't nice to her, they told her straight out that she didn't have what it took. One story says they even returned her mother's money and told Lucille she didn't have any talent years later. Lucille said that all she learned there was how to be scared, but that rejection didn't break her, it made her more determined to prove everyone wrong. She came back to New York in 1928 still chasing her dream, but this time she got rheumatic fever and couldn't move or perform for 2 years. She was stuck in bed watching time pass while most people would have given up. Lucille didn't. She thought about what her teachers had said, but she didn't give up. When she finally got better, she came back more focused than ever. Around the same time, she got a modeling job with designer Hattie Carnegie. It was a big deal. Carnegie saw something in Lucille but insisted that she make one big change: she had to bleach her brown hair blonde. Lucille didn't think twice, she changed her look, learned how to carry herself in fancy gowns, and soaked up everything she could about elegance and presence. It was a whole new kind of training that acting school never gave her, even though she was still acting. She got better at moving, looking, and holding an audience's attention without saying a word when she went back to trying to get acting roles. In the 1930s and 1940s, Lucille took whatever she could get, like supporting roles, forgettable leads, and slapstick comedies. She was in over 75 movies, but she never made it to the top level. Hollywood called her the Queen of the B's, and even though she joked about it by calling herself the Queen of the B+ES, it hurt. Studio executives tried to put her in roles that didn't quite fit her as a flapper glamour girl comedic sidekick, but she kept going. The roles weren't great, but they gave her something even better: experience. She learned every part of the business, figured out what worked and what didn't, and slowly built the skills that would one day let her take over the screen on her own terms, not as someone else's idea of a star. Lucille Ball met Desi Arnaz on the set of a movie called Too Many Girls in 1940. She was already a star. Desi was a young band leader just starting out in Hollywood. The moment they met, something clicked. He walked up to her and asked if she knew how to rumba. He then showed her a few moves and told her, "I can teach you quickly, but only if you go out with me tonight." Later, Lucille was hooked. She said she'd never fallen in love so quickly. Desi was charming, good-looking, and full of energy. People working on the movie noticed the sparks right away, and some even started betting on how long the relationship would last. It seemed too fast and intense to be real, but Lucille couldn't stay away. She said he scared her a little because he was so unpredictable, which made her like him even more. After the movie was over, they kept talking on expensive long-distance calls. Lucille estimated she spent around $29,000 just on calls. A few months later, in November 1940, they were both in New York. Desi was performing at a theater, and Lucille was doing an interview for a magazine. In the interview, she said that talking about their relationship would never work. Later that day, after a fight about Desi seeing another woman, she showed up at his house furious. The fight ended with a surprise. Desi asked her to marry him. They got in a car and drove to Connecticut, where they eloped that night, only 6 months after meeting. Their marriage shocked a lot of people. Studios didn't think a Cuban man and a white woman could work together on or off screen in the 1940s. Years later, when Lucille wanted to bring her radio show to TV, CBS said no when she insisted Desi play her husband because they didn't think the audience would accept it. But Lucille stood her ground, and looking back, she called their elopement the most daring thing I ever did. Her friends thought it wouldn't last, and she said, they gave it 6 months. They were married for 6 weeks, but right after the honeymoon, problems started to arise. Desi traveled a lot with his band. Lucille had to get up early for work, and he was out late playing shows. Their schedules barely crossed. On top of that, Desi had grown up in a culture where cheating wasn't seen as wrong. His father had taken him to a brothel when he was only 12. He thought that sleeping with other women didn't mean he wasn't emotionally loyal to Lucille, but it hurt Lucille. Before they got married, people told Lucille that Desi had a reputation with women from coast to coast. By 1944, only 4 years into the marriage, Lucille had had enough and filed for divorce. They fought loudly and often, and their daughter Lucy later said that her childhood was full of yelling. But even after the divorce, Lucille and Desi couldn't stay apart. They got back together in what some called a fiery reunion. This wasn't the last time they'd break up and try again. It became. Working alone was tearing them apart, but they thought that working together might bring them back together. In 1950, CBS wanted to make Lucille Ball's popular radio show My Favorite Husband into a TV show, but Lucy shocked them by saying she would only do it if her real-life husband Desi Arnaz played her husband on the show too. The network didn't like the idea because Desi was Cuban and had a strong accent, and they didn't think American viewers would accept him as the husband of an all-American woman at the time. Interracial marriages were not common on TV and were still illegal in many U.S. states, but Lucy didn't give up. To show they could work together, she and Desi put together a live stage act and toured the country doing comedy bits and musical performances. Fans and critics loved them, and their chemistry was clear. The tour was such a hit that CBS finally agreed to cast Desi, and I Love Lucy was born. Getting the show made wasn't easy, though, because CBS wanted it to be filmed in New York. Lucy refused to leave Hollywood, where most TV shows were made, and that decision changed television forever. Working with producer Jess Oppenheimer Desi, she helped come up with a new way to film with 3 cameras at once in front of a live studio audience. It was risky because they had to find a studio that could meet safety rules and fit an audience, but they did it with help from CBS. This new way of filming made a big difference because it let actors act scenes out like a play instead of It was great because they were able to record real laughter and reactions from the audience, and Desi insisted that they use high-quality 35mm film instead of the blurry tape that most shows used at the time. Lucy and Desi took a pay cut in exchange for owning the episodes through their company Desilu. Because the episodes were filmed in such high quality, they could be shown over and over again for decades, making I Love Lucy one of the first big syndication successes in 1952. The show ran into another problem when Lucy got pregnant with their second child. At the time, it was considered rude to show or even talk about pregnancy on TV, so CBS and the show's sponsor Philip Morris told Desi that it couldn't happen on screen. But Lucy and Desi were firm. They didn't want to hide Lucy behind props or completely avoid the subject. Instead, the writers came up with a clever way to get around this problem. They would include her pregnancy in the story but never use the word pregnant. They used more polite language instead. For safety's sake, religious leaders looked over the script before the episode where Lucy gives birth aired in January 1953, the same day Lucy had her baby in real life. 44 million people watched, and the story goes that people across the country used less water while the show was on because they didn't want to miss a moment. After that, I Love Lucy became unstoppable for 4 of its 6 seasons, and it was the most watched show in the country when it ended in 1957. 5 Emmys were won by the show, and Lucy and Desi won one for Best Comedian. Desi and Oppenheimer also won Emmys. The show became a landmark in TV history, and even after it ended, I Love Lucy kept reaching new audiences. In 2012, reruns aired around the world, and in 2013, a poll named it the best TV show of all time. In 2013, a colorized version of a Christmas episode drew over 8 million viewers in a single night, more than 60 years after it started. Lucy and Desi's show was still making waves. Behind the scenes, the couple started their own company called Desilu Productions. Within a few years, it became the biggest independent TV studio in the country. They bought RKO Studios for $6 million and started making shows like The Untouchables, The Andy Griffith Show, and The Dick Van DJ Show. It all began because they wanted to stay together and believed in what they were building. But by 1960, Lucy and Desi's marriage ended, and what happened next shocked everyone. Lucy bought out Desi's shares for $2.5 million. Many people didn't believe Lucy could run a major Hollywood studio because they thought she was just a comedian and not a businesswoman, but she proved them wrong while still starring in The Lucy Show. She made tough executive decisions, managed big budgets, negotiated deals, and planned for the future. She even started a syndication company within Desilu to handle reruns, which was something almost no one thought about at the time. Then, in 1966, Lucy did one of her bravest things. She approved. No one else believed in Lucy's 2 new expensive shows, Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Her team told her the shows were too risky, too expensive, and too strange, but Lucy went with her gut. At one point, she thought Star Trek was about celebrities going on tour, but she saw something special in it, and she was right. Both shows became classics, and by early 1967, Desilu was doing well again. Lucy sold the studio for $17 million, leaving behind a huge profit and a reputation as one of the smartest people in television history. CBS wanted Lucy and Desi to film I Love Lucy live in New York, but they insisted on staying in California and offered to take a pay cut if they could film the show on 35mm. That one choice changed everything. It made reruns possible, it started the syndication industry, and it made I Love Lucy a show that would keep making money for decades. Even now, more than 70 years later, it's estimated to have made over $700 million in rerun revenue. Lucille Ball didn't just make I Love Lucy a hit, she also made it a hit. People laugh at Lucille Ball because she changed the way TV works by taking risks, believing in herself, and never giving up. In September 1953, something happened that almost ended her career. It started with a rumor that she had been a communist. It was spread by gossip reporter Walter Winchell on a national radio show. He didn't name her, but everyone knew who he meant. The next morning, reporters were outside of Lucille and Desi's house waiting for a story. That same day, the Los Angeles Times. There was a big headline in Herald Express that said Lucille Ball was a communist. Other papers quickly picked up on the story. Suddenly, America's favorite comedian and the star of the most-watched TV show was being called a communist. This wasn't just gossip. Being linked to communism could ruin your life. People were losing their jobs and getting blacklisted. I Love Lucy had 44 million viewers, sponsors had spent millions of dollars on it, and now it all hinged on something Lucille Ball had done almost 20 years earlier. She became a communist voter in 1936, but not because she believed in it. She did it to make her grandfather happy. He raised her and he believed in workers' rights. She was trying to keep the peace in the family, but now that choice was coming back to haunt her. She sat down with a government investigator and told them everything. She was scared, but honest. She said she had never been to any communist meetings. Sure, her name had come up once. Someone said there had been a meeting at her house in the 1930s, but she had never been to any. When Lucille said she didn't know about it, her brother agreed. They both said it was all to please their grandfather and not because they were part of any political movement. While Lucille was scared of losing everything, Desi Arnaz didn't do nothing. He called reporters into their home, sat them down, and told them what had happened. He said Lucille wasn't a communist and never had been. But he didn't stop there while the new season was being filmed. In the first episode, he did something even riskier. With reporters in the audience and a tense atmosphere, Desi spoke to them from the stage and said he had made a phone call and had someone on the line. He then held the phone up to the microphone and it was FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover said it loud and clear, Lucille Ball was not a communist. The crowd cheered and the room went electric. Desi had cleared her name in front of the whole country, but he still had one more thing to say with his voice. He looked at the crowd and said, "Now I want you to meet my favorite redhead. The only thing red about her is her hair, and even that's not real." The joke hit, the tension broke, and Lucille, with tears in her eyes, stepped into the spotlight. The crowd roared. Soon after, Lucille Ball was named Woman of the Year, and she and Desi were invited to dinner at the White House. The scandal had almost destroyed her, but with honesty, bravery, and a little humor, she and Desi turned things around after a long and painful time. After her divorce from Desiree Arnaz in 1960, Lucille Ball had no plans to get married again. She was 49 years old, tired, and heartbroken. But one night in New York, a friend set her up on a blind date with a nightclub comedian named Gary Morton. Lucille was performing on Broadway at the time, and the date took place at a pizza place. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Gary was 13 years younger than Lucille, and he said he had never seen I Love Lucy because he was always working on Monday nights when it aired. That impressed Lucille because it meant he was serious. Started dating her 11 months later and got married 11 months later. The ceremony was small, with only about 40 guests, but when they left the church, a huge crowd waited outside to cheer them on. Lucy was wished luck. In letters she wrote later, Lucille couldn't stop talking about how happy she was. She said Gary was kind, funny, handsome, and loving, and she felt lucky to have found him. They were married for almost 28 years, until she died. When they met, Lucille had just started her one and only Broadway show, Wildcat. Opening night was pushed back because trucks carrying the sets got stuck on the highway during a snowstorm. Lucille's company, Delu Productions, had put a lot of money into the show, and there was a lot of pressure on her. People expected her to act like Lucy Ricardo from TV, but the role was very different, so Lucille started changing her performance by making jokes and using facial expressions that reminded people of her TV character. It didn't help that the reviews weren't great, and the stress got to her health. The show had to be cancelled because she got sick, and one night in April she passed out on stage. The producers tried to stop the show so she could rest, but the musicians' union said they still had to be paid, and the costs were too high, so the show ended after only 171 performances. It was a rough time in her career, and things weren't better at home when her teenage son Desi Jr. started dating actress Patty Duke in 1970. Patty was 23 years old, and Lucille didn't like it at all. Ironically, Lucille had been 6 years older than Desi Sr. Patty said she didn't hold a grudge but was deeply hurt because she felt she had good intentions and didn't deserve to be treated like a threat. On top of that, she was angry about her son's relationship. She gave him harsh ultimatums: if he didn't end it, he'd be kicked out of the house and his will would be cut off completely. Desi Jr. thought his mom was mostly worried about protecting the family's image. She was having problems with her mental health and dating at the same time. Still, Patty's relationship with Desi Jr. kept going on and off. Then there was the scandal. She got pregnant soon after marrying Michael Tell. The marriage only lasted 13 days, but rumors started going around that Desi Jr. was the real father. Lucille was horrified. She had worked hard for years to have a good public image, and this was the last thing she wanted. Patty later admitted that she let people think Desi was the father even though she knew he wasn't. She didn't lie, but she also didn't correct the story. When she had her son Sean in 1971, the hospital had to hide his name to keep reporters away from Desi Sr. and Lucy, Desi Jr.'s sister, who visited the baby. Lucille didn't. Years later, DNA tests showed that Michael Tell was Sean's real father, but Desi Jr. stayed in Sean's life because they had a bond. The damage was done. The scandal, the gossip, and the drama were all exactly what Lucille had feared. Her family's name was dragged through a scandal. Most people thought Lucille Ball's career would end when I Love Lucy ended in 1957, but Lucy wasn't even close. In 1962, she returned with a new show called The Lucy Show, which, to everyone's surprise, became even more popular than her last one. By 1968, she was back on top, but she did something surprising: she quit. She had sold her company Desilu and didn't want to keep working on something she no longer owned, so she started over with a new production company and a new series. Here's Lucy again, and this time it was personal. She cast her real-life children, Lucy and Desi Jr., to play her kids on the show because she said she wouldn't do it unless they were in it. The show tried to speak to a new generation by talking about civil rights, rock music, and changing social norms. It was Lucy's attempt to stay relevant in a world that was changing. But by 1973, the show's ratings were dropping, and Lucy herself was eyeing a return to the big screen with My. Finally stepped back, but Lucy was already having problems behind the scenes. Her best friend and co-star Vivian Vance quit The Lucy Show years before. Vance was tired from the long drive from her home on the East Coast to the studio in Los Angeles. She asked for more money and creative input but didn't get it. She quit, and Lucy cried in private, saying she couldn't imagine doing the show without her. The format of the show had to be changed completely after Vance's departure. Lucy did something no one expected her to do in 1985, when she was 74 years old. She played a homeless woman in a TV drama called Stone Pillow. She wanted to show that she could do more than just comedy, and the show did very well in the ratings. This made her want to try one more sitcom, Life with Lucy, but the world had moved on, and the show was panned by critics and cancelled after only 8 episodes. It was the first time in Lucy's life that a show had been pulled in the middle of the season. The failure hit her hard, and she stopped going out in public after her last TV show. At the 1989 Oscars, she stood next to Bob Hope and got a standing ovation. That same year, Lucille Ball died, but before that, in 1986, something very important happened. Lucille's ex-husband and former co-star Desi Arnaz was dying of cancer. Even though they had divorced decades before, their love had never gone away, and Lucy visited him often. Their daughter Lucy later said that their bond was still strong, even in death. On November 30, 1986, which would have been their 46th wedding anniversary. Desi couldn't speak, so Lucy held the phone to his ear and told him over and over that she loved him. Desi nodded and said, "I love you too, honey." Then, with what little strength he had left, he told her, "Good luck with your show." Desi died 2 days later, with Lucy by his side. 3 years later, on April 18, 1989, Lucy was rushed to the hospital with chest pain. Doctors found a tear in her heart's main artery. She had a long, risky surgery, and for a while it looked like she might. Fans from all over the world sent her thousands of cards, but 8 days later she felt a sudden pain in her back and her body gave out. Doctors tried for almost an hour to save her, but they couldn't. Lucille Ball died on April 26, 1989, at the age of 77. The world lost one of its biggest stars, but more than that, it lost a woman who had fought to be seen, loved, and remembered until the very end.